Hearty shalom to you, Jeffrey Seif here in Acts chapter 24, picking up with you this week on Paul's defense in front of the governor Felix. As you might recall, Paul was arrested. The commander in Jerusalem tried to make sense out of all this. He realized that it was beyond him, so he dispatches Paul with a variety of soldiers to escort. He's under arrest to go down to Caesarea Maritime, where he is now, giving an account of what he's all about before the governor. And I want to look at some of the components of this in Acts chapter 24, 16 through 21, just because I think they're just so important. If you look with me, Paul says in verse 16 to him, I do my best always to have a clear conscience before both God and men. What a profound statement. I do my best to have a clear conscience before God and men. That is so very significant. We live in a world today where many of us deny our conscience. We not only make shipwreck of our faith in our interior world, but exterior to us. We have sown deceit with the result of distrust, and it just paralyzes webs of relationships because people don't, like this author, take pains to have a clear conscience before God and men. By the way, that said, if you find yourself relating to that, know that you can push the reset button. There's forgiveness of sins, where we ask the good Lord for forgiveness, and then others as well. There are people that ask the Lord for forgiveness all the time that don't ask other human beings, and I don't like that. Well, he goes on to say, and I don't want to belabor that point, though it's a sermon in and of itself. In verse 17, he's waxing autobiographical here. He says, after several years, I came to bring tzedakah to my country for the poor and to present offerings. Rabbi Shaul, when he was out in the galut, in the diaspora, in the dispersion, ministering in synagogues beyond Judea and to individuals of non-Jewish extract who frequented them, when he was out and about performing his ministry, whether it was in Asia Minor, modern Turkey, whether it was Greece, northern Greece, Macedonia, southern Greece, Achaia, bumping up far to the north in Thrace, wherever he was, whatever direction he was going, when he pioneered congregations, what we call churches, he asked them to pony up funds in order to be a blessing to the Messianic movement in Jerusalem. There's a political aspect of that he's out there doing something new, but when he brings money from the new crop to Jerusalem, it shows a kind of fraternity, a kind of fidelity, a kind of caring and sharing. And he wants to make that point, and he's making it here. He says that he came to Jerusalem with tzedakah, with mercy money. A tzaddik is a righteous person. Tzedakah is charity. It's a Jewish expression of piety. And his congregations, constituted by non-Jews and Jews, set aside monies to bring to Jerusalem. And Paul was there with the group that brought the money. And while there, in verse 18, he says that he was in the temple where he purified himself to go there and worship. Paul himself was an observant Jew. He goes to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is where the temple complex is, and he's there worshiping. He says without crowd or uproar, that he's not looking to make a fuss. He's just there. In verse 19, but, he says, there were some from Asia. This would be Asia Minor then. This is the central western portion of Turkey of today. And he says there were some there who ought to be here before you to press charges because they instigated it. These people that knew of Paul personally and or by reputation, when word got out that he was in the temple complex, they had an axe to grind with him. And so they trumped up charges of him allegedly bringing someone of non-Jewish extract into a part of the temple that's reserved for Hebrews only, and they cried foul, and there was an uproar, and with rumor and innuendo, things just cascade out of control. He says they ought to be here to bring the charge. Or verse 20, let these men themselves tell what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the Sanhedrin. You know, his claim is that he didn't do anything. The only problem that he says here, that he cried out, that really fundamentally when push comes to shove, he believes in the resurrection. And there were members of the council that weren't disposed that way. They were all about this life in a religious sense rather than a life to come. Paul not only believed in the resurrection of the dead, which, by the way, is a cardinal Jewish doctrine. The Sadducees didn't believe the resurrection, the Pharisees did, and the Pharisees won the day at the end of the day. And the belief in the resurrection, Tehiyat Hamatim in Hebrew, is one of the cardinal doctrines in Judaism even to this day. Now, modern Jews don't know the basics, the essence and the substance of religion, the Jewish religion in so many ways, but it's there, one of the major pillars. And Paul stakes his claim that he believes in the resurrection. Of course, he doesn't just believe in the resurrection generally. He believes that Yeshua was raised from the dead, and similarly that he will bring back those who have been born anew and develop a rapport with him that way. So that is his case here. Again, to look at Rabbi Paul when he's being questioned, he says he endeavors to keep a clear conscience. He says he came to Jerusalem with monies to help the poor there. He says there was a misunderstanding in the temple complex, and that principally he believes in the resurrection. He's representing himself, this author, as standing within a Jewish worldview on the Pharisaic side of the house. And his claim is that the uproar over him is a big misunderstanding. Let me just say, as we pivot away from that and just go to application, I think that Paul is very much misunderstood today. To me, it's fascinating. The founder of Christianity, so-called, is an Orthodox Jewish rabbi who in his own way and his own day is wanting to express his fidelity to the ancestral culture, the Jewish culture, the Hebrew culture. And by the way, that's so much the project of individuals like me and the Tree of Life Bible Society and the whole Messianic Jewish movement, which has produced scholars now, people that are teachers. You know, there's some books behind me here in my study with me here, and I've read a couple books and been a college professor for 30 years, among other things. And, you know, I'm all about wanting to teach the good news through the eyes of the Jews, and I want to thank you for your interest in that sort of thing. I and we think we need to rediscover Paul. You know, in the Catholic world, he's Saint Paul. You know, in the Baptist world, he's Brother Paul. Well, in our world, he's Rabbi Paul. And he is here speaking to that. That is to say, here's a man who is giving voice to a belief that the Messiah has come, and his name is Yeshua, who understands himself to be a Jew even still. Jews believe in the Messiah, this Jew thought he came. Jews believe in the Messiah, this Jew thought he came. And I want to thank you for standing with people like us and helping to bring the good news and to look at the good news through the eyes of the Jews. Well, I'm going to sign out now. Let's do this again in a week, okay? Ciao. God bless.